Afternoon, where it is where I am at the moment. This is episode 6 of the Astrakhan's Feather. Just a really quick recap. That's the word, isn't it? Just a very quick recap. So there's been a car crash in the night when the storm was on, and Karen Allen, who's a acting inspector at Bone Mountain, gets down there first because she was on duty overnight, and she got the call when it came through from Johnny Milko, the milkman. Anyway, here we go. So, look, I hope you're enjoying this. There's a few people watching it now, so either you're enjoying it or you're using it to get to sleep at night. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue. So Karen's on the scene now. Karen lobbed the mobile through the Peugeot's open window, where it bounced a couple of times on the passenger seat. She turned and stared down. In England, a ditch is maybe a foot deep. This one looked like the bloody Grand Canyon. It was clear where the car had left the road. Tyres had scored the earth at the roadside, and she could see the torn earth on the way down where the underside had snagged several times before coming to rest at the bottom. Long way down. Karen looked at the portly milkman with the red face and big belly. "You can go now if you want," she said. "I wouldn't want your milk to curdle." Johnny Trot sniffed and wrinkled his nose. Bloody Pom, he thought. What with her silk skirt and fancy red car, a Peugeot, he thought it was called. Who did she think she was? A mere slip of a girl, too. He couldn't believe they let her join the cops. "Yeah, well, you'll know where to find me," he said. Karen raised an eyebrow. "Always around and about I am, in and out," he smirked. "After all, I'm a Milko." And then he winked hard at her. Karen looked at the ground, took a deep breath, blew it out through kissing lips as she pinched the bridge of her nose, then looked at Johnny Trot and gave him a business smile. "Thanks for the call, Mr. Trot, much appreciated." He grunted and clambered into his van. Karen waited for him to disappear out of sight before gazing down in the ditch again. She'd replaced her heels with the trainers she kept in the car, but looked down at her skirt and blouse and made a mental note to ditch the silk next time. Having said that, the day was already heating up, and at least she was still cool. She squinted at a sky the colour of freshly beaten steel that glared right back at her. Second step down, she almost lost her footing. But then she stopped and looked closely and thought she could see a way. She'd spent days hiking in Britain with Chipper Rowe in happier times. Chipper Rowe. He's going to come into the stories. Don't worry. Don't worry about who he is at the moment. Karen had gone down the side of Welsh Shale Mountain sure as a goat, so she wasn't too worried, even though it seemed a long way down here. She narrowed her eyes. Gold-pointed star on the boot lid, a Merc. The car's nose, almost up to the windscreen, was stuck in the bank of a stream, or creek as they called it here, she remembered, which, though not especially wide, was flowing and gurgling along swiftly enough. A faint mist above the water was shot through in one small sunny spot with a rainbow. Any other time you go, she thought. Karen was going well. She reckoned 3/4 of the way down when someone shouted, "Hey!" Get it? Just in case you were sleeping. And she turned to look and lost her footing. Next she knew she was on her side, then her back, slithering down, the sheer silk skirt and blouse helping smooth her way, bumping over clumps of mud, old tree roots, and crashing through small gorse bushes. By the time her feet landed in the water, she was winded and then very wet. She stumbled to her feet, one hand in the creek, a gold Cartier submerged. That's a watch. She caught her breath at the cold. She looked back up at the road and had to shade her eyes with a shaky, muddy hand to see who the silhouette was up there. "Is that the best way down, then?" shouted Dr. Tony Shulp. Karen groaned, but then she looked inside the car and jumped and almost died. All right. Now we switch over to another person. Yeah, I know. There are quite a few characters, fair dues. I'm just trying to keep you, sort of active and up to date. Okay, Benny Benson was naked and wet. He was singing at the top of his voice. He raised his head, voice soaring. He was in a Los Angeles recording studio, and his singing career was going off the charts. Next to him, doing the duet, Rihanna was naked too, red hair and all. Benny reached out a hand to her and squeezed the bar of soap. He turned the shower off and heard the phone ringing. He knew better than to race out there. He'd done that 10 years ago when he was just 13, slipped on the wet bathroom floor, chipped a front tooth. whenever he smiled at the mirror, he was reminded of that youthful accident. I got to tell you, I got that little bit about the chipped tooth from my mate Michael. Michael and I we didn't grow up. We played together, and that's in a very innocent way. We played together when we were very young in a place called Lime Avenue, right? He lived opposite. We were the same age, went to school together. And yeah, I must have lived there from when I was about 2 or 3, I think. Same with him. Anyway, we were good mates. But he did this. He slipped when he came out of the shower, whacked himself and chipped a tooth. He always had that, you know. He died a few years ago, Mike. I think if I remember correctly, he got cancer. We didn't keep in touch. You know, you don't, do you, when you move away? We moved away. He always stayed there. His family always stayed there. And it's only a couple of years ago, I think his mum died. She was kind of the last one in the family that I knew. Anyway, I kind of put this in. I thought, you know, it's about Mike, right? You should always try and remember people. Anyway, on we go. Benny Benson's in the shower, singing away, imagining he's with Rihanna, as you do. Right. He gently kissed Rihanna, that's the soap, and put her back on the soap holder, stepped out of the shower, vigorously towelled himself and made his blood flow. He ambled to the lounge and touched the phone's message button. Double B, stop the wanking boy, out of bed. I'm on my way over in a love machine. Got an emergency on. Benny shook his head. He could barely stand partnering with Cooper Blackwelder, but given this was his first posting since police college, he didn't have a lot of choice. Day after he arrived, Sergeant Mullins got Coop to take them on a tour of the area. "What's with the trainers, Sarge?" said Benny. As they trundled, Coop peered through the top of the pursuit car's windscreen at a pair of grubby tennis shoes hanging over the phone lines. "Crack tennis," said Bob Mullins from the back of the car. It had been the girl's idea to send them out on the tour of the local command, as she liked to call it. The drug dealers chuck 'em up there, point patrons to their door. It's a different world than the one you're maybe used to, added Mullins, looking closely at Benny's neatly shaven, baby cheek neck right there next to him. Probably had Daddy's barber do it, he thought, but not unkindly. He'd reserved judgment on the boy, but for sure he didn't like all this change happening at the same time. New inspector, no Christ, new beat cop. Wasn't his idea as steady as you go, that was for sure. "Everyone has at least 3 dogs bark all night," growled Coop at the wheel. "All right, they let 'em roam loose then, not like pets. They never go in the house," said Mullins. "They're all mongrels up here," said Coop. "Every dog," said Benny. "He means the people," said Mullins flatly, "even though he lives up here himself." Coop looked at the Sarge in the mirror. Mullins turned his eyes away, looked out the side window and mumbled almost to himself. "Down in the township, they've got money. Up here, it's like Alabama. They've got guns, booze, dogs, and relationship issues caused by the guns, booze, and the dogs." Coop said some of them even got some cunt Sanjay call him 15 times a day, asking when the monthly credit card's going to be paid. Benny and Bob Mullins looked at Cooper Blackwelder's red face in his rearview mirror and knew the Coop had personally answered the phone to Sanjay from Delhi more times than he probably cared to mention. "Every month you're going to have to get your tyres patched maybe 10 times on account of all the tradies' loose screws and nails over the road," Coop said as he threaded the rumbling cop car past parked cars either side of the road, one of them on bricks, no glass in the back window. "You'll hear their pickups." I put pickups. Why did I do that? Because in Australia they're called utes, not pickups, right? Let's change that. I'm doing that as I go along. "You'll hear their utes clatter on past your house from before dawn," said Coop. "Half the stuff poorly stashed. Sometimes you'll come across ratchets in the road, belt webbing, screwies, hammers, you name it. I even had to swerve to avoid half a fucking vanity unit before it was even light one day." This is true. Okay, so we've had numerous tyres having to be replaced because they've picked up nails or screws. They've come off tradies. These are blokes. It's the Australian slang and short name for tradespeople. And these things just drop off their bloody vehicles all the time, and then your car picks it up, then you have to have a new tyre, right? It's really irritating. Anyway, Benny Benson says, you give them tickets, unsafe loads? Asked Benny. Coop jerks his head around and looks at Benny. You fucking joking? Sorry, Sarge. He swivels his thick neck back and stares straight ahead out the windscreen, lips compressed. One day you'll need your house rewired. That's true. You got to keep on the right side of them. You can say what you like about the screws and the bolts and nails, but one day you will need one of them to come and do something around your house. So it's a bit like that. Also, I've got to tell you, I've painted the area a lot worse than it is. It's actually a lovely area, and I love living there, right? Even though I'm not there at the moment. But anyway, you know, it's fictional license, right? Anyway. So, we'll just go a little back a bit where he's saying, you know, he needed to avoid an effing vanity unit that was in the street. And Coop said, yeah, one day you'll need your house rewired. He looks back at Benny quickly, or a new crapper bowl. Yeah, there might be one on the street. Then again, breathed Bob Mullins, fingers threaded together on his belly, watching a scrubby scenery in half-hidden houses roll by under a blowtorch sun. The heat kept at bay by the car's blaring aircon and dark windows. There's your arty types too up here. Painters, actors, playwrights, even the odd successful writer. And me, an unsuccessful writer. But not to worry, not to worry. Coop snorted. Oh, yeah. But really, Sarge, what use are they when your plumbing goes to shit? That's your writers. It's true. This came to me. I'm sorry to digress. I know it's stopping the flow of it a bit, but it's sometimes nice to get the context, I think. Apparently that's what the Australian Broadcasting Corporation like about having me on. Always give context. I think I just talk a lot. Anyway, the thing about, what use is a writer when your plumbing goes to shit? This came from Stephen Hawkins, his wife, actually. And she said that one day they'd had a plumber come round. He'd had to do some work on the house. And the plumber said, oh, what does your husband do? And she said, oh, well, he's a world expert in quantum physics. And apparently the plumber said, yeah, but what's the use of that? So it's right, isn't it? Anyway, so I just put that in here. Anyway, Benny, he so wanted to be a model policeman, but a month after walking through Bone Mountain Station's doors for the first time, he was beginning to realise Coop was involved in dodgy stuff, some of it possibly even illegal. It had shocked him at first. He'd gone into the police service to make a difference. His father had warned him against it, but then Benjamin Sr. was a lawyer, and nobody believed anything they said. Dad had always expected his son to go into the law, and Benny figured that's what he'd done, even though, of course, he knew Benjamin Benson's idea was the bar, and not the one with cheap beer at the police club either. Still, he thought as he dressed in his uniform this fine morning, strapped the Glock on and checked himself in the mirror, he'd try his best, aim to be a top cop, make his father proud one day. Benny's slight build and fastidious dress sense contrasted sharply with Coop Blackwelder, who was big and spreading, sweated a lot, had full-sleeved tats and didn't think a warm iron had any business near a shirt. Benny frowned and touched the edge of the mirror to stop it vibrating. He looked out the window as Coop's police cruiser rumbled into view, sighed when the throttle was dropped, the roar making crockery tremble and dogs bark and howl all along the street. Coop eyed Double B's apartment over his sonny's. Coop lived at what was considered by just about everyone to be the bad part of the mountain, but he preferred it to this edge of Bone Mountain, almost in the township, or near Currajong, where most newcomers lived. Outsiders, his uncle called them, and always spat on the ground when he said it. Outsiders. There we go. Unc's family were first fleeters and proud of it. Convicts too, not your squaddies, Coop had told Benny, and spat out the car's window like Unc would have done. Set to hard labour, said Coop, smashing rocks or building or something. Who knows? Strong they were, afraid of no one. Got their papers, made their way out from the city, broke the land, poisoned the abos, farmed, did stuff. People think it's different now, Coop had told Benny quietly as they'd sat waiting for speeders, the pursuit car hidden behind scrubby bush, hot air blowing through the open window. But no way, said Coop, ain't no different at all. Coop flicked his smoking stub out the window when a gold Mitsubishi lit up the speed gun. He spat out the window, gunned the engine, made the car wail and fishtailed it. He leered at Benny. Light him up. It ain't short for nothing. It's just Trey, Cooper told Benny slowly, looking at him out the corner of his eye like he was some dumb kid with a learning difficulty. They parked the car and got out, feet crunching on tinder-dry wattle and road-grade gravel. Unc's a car man, said Benny, as he walked through the rusting car graveyard set in a dark forest clearing. A click, click, click grew louder above the squeal of cicadas and the hum of the day's heat until they got to an old Ford with its bonnet up, the rust of its wing and a stand of sunflowers buzzing with bees. Uncle Trey straightened up with the click-clicking wrench tight in his hand and looked at Benny. Uncle Trey wore faded blue overalls and a full white beard and long grey hair fixed in a ponytail corkscrewed with green bale twine. His eyes were milky blind man blue, and when he looked at Benny it made him uneasy and want to fidget and run away. This is based on a real bloke that I knew up there. I don't know him, I don't know who he is, but I'd seen him. I went to buy some eggs off him once. Scared the shit out of me. It's the last half dozen eggs I had from there. But anyway, Benny reckoned Trey had been in his late 60s, but he was a good 6 foot tall and solid and muscular. He held his head high as he looked down with the milkies. "You got a friend," he growled, smiling, not taking his eyes off Benny. "Yeah," said Coop, scuffing his boot, and Benny knew this was not a happy, snappy family. He looked around with his cop eyes and clocked the dark low house that looked like it was made of black wood off a way, surrounded by dense trees moving slowly in a soupy hot breeze. It would be cool inside, sometimes even cold, but it would always be dark and forbidding no matter what the weather. He shivered and thought, all that's missing here is the swamp, but then maybe they had one out back. Cooper confided in Benny the police cruiser's engine was a breathed-on donk, as he said. When the car rumbled along in low-gear vibration from its power plant, it made folks' windows rattle. "Drop the loud pedal," Cooper told Benny. "You get two-stepped asymmetric superchargers powering a quad chain drive." Cooper thrown him a glance as he accelerated the cruiser. "Hear that chatter? All bolted on a custom-built V12. This babe will give you 900 kilowatts of power, more than 4 times your normal poke." Benny had nodded and opened his eyes wide and made his brow crease, just so he looked impressed. He couldn't have cared less about the police car's engine and knew nothing about what Coop was talking about. "Gearbox has got Teflon in it," said Coop, excited as they hurtled along. "Smooth as your baby arse, Double B. Cranks and conrods are hand ground and been aligned by Unc using feel and touch." Cooper jabbed at his head, listening with his fucking ear. "No fancy diagnostic crap." "Diagnostic," said B. Coop looked at him. "Whatever. Thing is," he pulled over and swept past a truck on a bend so quick Benny felt like he was being sieved through his seat. "This is a machine, ain't nothing faster." "Christ, Tesla, that's fast and not even a turbo," said Benny. Coop snorted as he shifted in his seat. "Turbo schmerbo. Fucking boudoir on wheels." Benny shook his head. "Boudoir." Coop looked at him. "Yeah, maybe that too. Yeah, wouldn't surprise me." That's just a bit of a roundup. I might have to rewrite that. It's a bit of a roundup of Coop and Benny Benson. Tells you a bit about both of them, right? They're going to the accident. That's where they're going. Right. So we go back to the ditch there. And I don't want to make these too long because you'll get super bored, won't you? All right. Okay, we're just going to do another little bit. By the time Dr. Tony Schultz reached the bottom of the ditch in his big khaki shorts, long white socks, sensible lace-up shoes with the grippy rubber soles, and carefully combed over grey hair, Inspector Karen Allen had already thrown up twice. She was sitting on the muddy creek bank, head between her knees. Schultz squatted down alongside her. Karen noticed he smelt of light lavender. He patted her shoulder gently and said quietly, "It'll pass, but you need to get up. You're the officer in charge." Karen looked at him. Her mascara was streaked, eyes bloodshot, slick of mud on one cheek. She was shivering despite the rapidly growing heat of the day. Schultz took a deep breath, cleared his throat and opened his black bag. "You better see to them," croaked Karen, nodding to the car. Schultz frowned as he gently cleaned Karen's face with a wet wipe and said calmly and quietly, I imagine, given your reaction, they are well past helping, but I'll take a close look in a moment. It wouldn't do to have you looking like this when Sergeant Mullins arrives. Karen looked at him. Who called Mullins? He's not due on yet. Shulp laughed softly. By now the whole town will know something bad has happened out at Tarrant Fields. The milkman. Shulp nodded. Fastest milk cart in the West. Karen laughed. That's better. Here, wipe your eyes. You look like a panda. You're a charmer, Doctor. Shulp grunted and helped to stagger up. All right? Yeah, thank you. Right, I'll get to work, find out what's happened here. Karen looked up when she heard a car stop at the roadside. Mullins looked briefly over the top, then came down sure as a goat. He looked at her muddy clothes and said nothing. Gonna call me? Thought I could handle it myself, she said. Traffic accident, I thought. Driving too fast in the rain last night, slippery road, loses control, bang, here we are, but maybe more to it. Mullins crouched down, peered at the back screen, insides painted red, and frowned. He looked inside the passenger door window, his head jerked back, and he steadied himself, hand tight white bone on the Mercedes door jamb. He took a breath and looked again. Shulp, who was looking through the open driver's side door, nodded to him. Bob, girl's got a broken neck, would have died pretty much soon as it snapped. Mullins nodded. You think the crash could have done that, broken her neck? Shulp sucked his teeth. I'd say. Looks like she hit the dashboard, then when the car stopped for good, she bounces back on the seat. But usual story, got to get her back to the lab. Have a proper look. Shulp peered at Glory Rich closely and said softly, she is a beautiful girl. Mullins drew a breath. Still is, Tony, still is. Jesus, what a waste. And then there's Ray Lucas. Yeah, I see what's left of him, eh? Both men looked at the top half of the driver's head, a bloody, chomped-up mush revealing glistening brain and shattered skull bone. On one side, remaining bone stuck up skeletal. Dried blood had run down his cheeks like tracks of tears. He looked, thought Mullins, like a hard-boiled egg you just chopped the top off just above the eyes, but he decided not to share the insight. Karen eased in alongside him. Miss, all right? I'm okay, she said. She took a gulp of air. She could smell the blood. Fancied she tasted it too. She struggled not to throw up again. Mullins looked at the back window sprayed red, impregnated with pieces of grey. Never realised Ray had that much brain matter, Shulp laughed. Seems he was reasonably well endowed in that department. You knew him, obviously, said Karen. Mullins eased back. Local businessman, miss, has a place out at Saracen Copse, foothills of the mountain, reasonably flat land, good arable soils too. Always throwing his weight around, been done for speeding so many times, the fines would pay your salary for 2 years. Rumours abound about the gentleman. He left the mountain 20 years ago in a rusty ute, not a cent on him. Came back 5 years ago with a Ferrari and a trophy wife. He nodded at the car. Must have been slumming it. This is the wife's Merc. What's he doing with the girl? Asked Karen. Mullins sighed. That is, miss, I suspect, for us to find out. I know, said Karen. I just wondered if you had any ideas, that's all. Well, it's a murder, I'd say, said Mullins. We need to get Christ involved. Karen shook her head. Inspector Christ on extended leave. The super believes he may never come back. Mullins gritted his teeth. Suit you, that would, wouldn't it, miss? I don't care a flying fuck one way or the other, Sergeant. What we need to do first off is establish if this is simply an accident. But for sure, I'll be heading this investigation. Children, please, said Shulp calmly from the back seat of the car. Enough. Now, I don't think this is an accident. Mullins and Karen banged heads as they both tried to look through the car's doorway at the same time. The grey matter, said Shulp, is not entirely Mr. Lucas's brain. They stared at the doctor. No, some of it is the driver's headrest. You see, it has disappeared. They looked at where the thick leather headrest should have been. To be more specific, said Shulp, it has been obliterated. Well, how could that happen? Shulp held up a large, slightly misshapen ball of dull metal. As he rotated it in front of them, the ball painted his forensic gloves red. This is what did the damage, I'd say. Embedded in the rear seat, deep in the cushion. I'd guess first it came through the windscreen, took off the top of Ray Lucas's head, blew apart the headrest, painted the back window like Dali. Mullins snorted. Dali. Anyway, what is it? Shulp hefted the ball in his gloved hand. I'm certainly no expert, he said, but I'd say this is a shot. A shot? Musket, maybe. Musket? Shulp frowned at Mullins. Bob, can you stop repeating everything I say? It's very annoying. Karen laughed. Mullins raised hand, palm to the doctor. You talking musket, as in what, 18th, 19th century? Mullins nodded slowly. Be my best guess at the moment, he said. The metal's heavy, so probably iron, probably old, would need a substantial explosive charge to propel it. Shortish range, but deadly. Packs a punch, as we can see. Karen looked at what remained of Ray Lucas's head. She'd formed some detachment now from the carnage, but the taste of puke was still in her mouth. The girl's head was at an impossible angle, and there was an indentation in the middle of her forehead, with some blood spray on her lips, one cheek and chin. Her glassy eyes seemed to be watching. Karen shivered and tore her gaze away. Who the hell had used an old musket to kill someone? To answer that, we may need divine intervention, said Mullins grimly. Are you serious? Not quite, said Mullins flatly, but we do need Christ. Jesus. Schultz held a hand up. Enough, really. All right, we're going to leave it there because it's gone on a bit too long, hasn't it? 25 minutes. Anyway, we'll come back tomorrow with some more. You take care out there, folks. Look after yourselves. Bye-bye.